Imani Carter didn't mean to change her life that night. She only needed to feed her son. It was past 2 in the morning, the kind of hour where the whole world goes quiet, except for a hungry baby who doesn't understand the word *empty. She sat on the couch in her small apartment, Noah pressed against her chest, the last baby bottle on the table bone dry. The formula canister had been empty since Tuesday. She'd been stretching it with water, hatting herself a little more each time. She picked up her phone, scrolled to the one person she had left to ask, typed the message she'd been putting off for 3 days. Hit send. Then she saw the name on the screen. Her whole body went still. That wasn't her cousin. She had never seen that name before in her life. If this story already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button right now. I've got another story dropping tomorrow that you will not want to miss. And drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing our community show up from everywhere. All right, back to Imani. 30 seconds passed. The screen stayed dark. She was already typing an apology with shaking hands when a reply came through. 3 words. Is your baby okay? She stared at those words for a long time, and something told her that whatever came next was going to be very different from anything she was ready for. Imani's fingers moved fast. She typed the apology before she even finished reading her own message back. I am so sorry. Wrong number. Please ignore that. I'm so sorry. She hit send, then sat there staring at the screen like she could will the whole thing out of existence. She couldn't. The message sat there, delivered, read. She pressed her face into the top of Noah's head and closed her eyes. He smelled like baby lotion and warm skin. He had finally stopped fussing, too tired to cry anymore, his little fingers curling and uncurling slowly against her sleeve. She focused on that, just that, not the humiliation sitting in her chest like a stone. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't look. Don't apologize. Is your baby okay? She read it twice, then a third time. There was nothing cold about it, no irritation. No, who is this and how did you get my number? Just a question. Calm and direct, like it was the most natural thing in the world for a stranger to ask. She didn't know why she answered. She would wonder about that for a long time afterward. Why, out of every possible thing she could have done, she typed back the truth. He's okay. He's just hungry. I made a mistake texting you. I'm sorry again. She set the phone face down, on the cushion beside her. It buzzed again almost immediately. You don't have to keep apologizing. That was all. She didn't respond. She sat in the warm lamplight with her son and listened to the apartment settle around her, the faint hum of the refrigerator, a car passing outside, the small, sleepy sounds Noah made as his eyes grew heavy. She told herself the conversation was over. She told herself to go to bed. Then her Cash App notification went off. She picked up the phone. $500. She sat completely still. The note attached was 2 words. For Noah. Something cracked open in her chest, not loudly, not all at once. Just a slow, quiet break, like ice giving way at the end of a long winter. She hadn't cried when the lights got shut off last month. She hadn't cried when Noah's father stopped answering her calls. She had trained herself out of it, told herself tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. But sitting there in that small apartment at 2 in the morning, holding her sleeping son, staring at a transfer from a stranger, she cried. She didn't fully understand why. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at the name again. Alexander Vaughn. She had never heard of him in her life. But he had used her son's name. And she had never told him what it was. She didn't sleep. She put Noah down in his crib just after 3, tucked the thin blanket around him, and stood there in the dark for a moment watching his chest rise and fall. Then she went back to the couch, pulled her knees up, and opened her phone. She started with the number. The search came back with nothing useful, just a carrier lookup. New York area code. That was it, so she typed the name instead. Alexander Vaughn. The results loaded fast. She scrolled slowly, then stopped. Forbes, TechCrunch, Bloomberg, Wired, his name was everywhere. There was a photo of him stepping out of a building in a dark coat, head slightly turned, like he hadn't noticed the camera or didn't care. The headline underneath read, Vaughn Technologies posts record quarter. CEO remains tight-lipped on expansion plans. She clicked on another article, then another. Tech CEO founded his company at 26, worth an estimated $2.4 billion as of last year, sat on 2 nonprofit boards, almost never gave interviews, known for being quiet, private, and according to one profile, asterisk, the kind of powerful that doesn't need to announce itself. Imani set the phone down on her knee. She picked it up again. $2.4 billion. She thought about the $500 sitting in her Cash app. She thought about the way he'd written asterisk for Noah asterisk like it was nothing. Like sending money to a stranger in the middle of the night was just something he did between meetings. She opened the app and hit send back. She typed a note with it. Thank you, but I can't accept this. I'm sorry for the trouble. She watched it process. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. He had declined the return. There was a message with it. It wasn't a loan. Please don't send it again. She stared at that sentence for a long time. It wasn't a loan. She turned it over in her mind, looking for the angle. There was always an angle. She had learned that the hard way, that generosity from people with power almost never arrived without something attached to the back of it. A favor expected later. A door that swings both ways. A debt that gets called in at the worst possible moment. But he hadn't asked for anything. Not her number, not her gratitude, not even her name. He already knew her son's name, somehow, and he had sent $500 in the middle of the night and told her it wasn't a loan and declined to take it back. Imani looked at his photo again. Calm eyes, unreadable expression. People with that kind of money didn't do things like this. Not without a reason. So what was his? 3 days passed. Imani didn't hear from him. She told herself that was fine. She told herself the whole thing was already over. A strange night, a stranger's kindness, something she would think about sometimes and never fully explain. She used part of the $500 on formula and diapers and the electric bill. She felt guilty about it for exactly 1 afternoon. Then Noah finished a full bottle without her watering it down, and the guilt got a little easier to carry. She was on her lunch break at her second job, a 20-minute window, a vending machine sandwich, her feet aching in her work shoes, when the message came through. I looked you up on LinkedIn. You studied accounting before you had to stop. I have a short-term contractor role, reviewing quarterly reports, fully remote, well paid. No obligation. I just thought you might want the option. She read it standing in a hallway that smelled like floor cleaner and burnt coffee. Then she put her phone in her pocket and finished her sandwich. She told herself she wasn't going to respond. She almost deleted the message on the bus ride home. Her thumb hovered over it twice. A billionaire she had never met had looked her up online, found her half-finished degree and her quiet little profile with no profile photo, and decided, what exactly? That she needed saving, that she was some kind of project. She put the phone away. That night, after Noah went down, she took it back out. She typed, "No thank you," and stared at it for 4 minutes. She deleted it. She typed asterisk, "I appreciate it, but I'm okay." Stared at that too. She was not okay. She had $38 left until Friday, and one of her part-time jobs had just cut her hours. She deleted that too. The thing was, she was good at accounting. She had been before everything fell apart. Numbers made sense to her in a way that most things didn't. She'd had a professor once tell her she had a sharper eye for patterns than anyone in the class. That was a long time ago now, another version of her life. She looked over at Noah asleep in his crib across the room. Then she typed, "What does the role involve exactly?" She hit send before she could stop herself. His response came within minutes. Clear, specific, professional. No pressure, no charm, just details. She asked 2 more questions. He answered both. At 11:15 on a Wednesday night, sitting cross-legged on her couch in the dark, Imani typed, "Okay, I'll do it." She set the phone down and sat very still. Something about it felt like an open door. She just couldn't tell yet whether the right move was to walk through it or run the other way. The work was straightforward, at first. Imani set up a small corner of the kitchen table as her workspace, laptop open, Noah and his bouncer beside her, a cup of coffee going cold on her right. The reports were dense but familiar. Quarterly figures, vendor payments, internal allocations. The kind of material she used to study in a classroom that felt like a different lifetime ago. She moved through the first 2 weeks cleanly, took notes, filed her summaries, got paid on time more than she had ever made at either of her part-time jobs combined. She didn't let herself think too much about that part. She just did the work. Then she hit the third batch of reports. She almost missed it. It was small, the kind of thing that wouldn't catch most people's eyes. 2 vendor accounts, both listed as logistics contractors, receiving regular transfers every 6 to 8 weeks. The amounts varied slightly each time, but they were always just below the threshold that would trigger an automatic audit flag. That didn't happen by accident. She went back further. The pattern held for 14 months. 2 vendors, rotating amounts, always just under the line. She searched both company names. Neither had a real web presence. No address she could verify, no history outside of these payments. She wrote it up carefully and submitted her flag through the internal system. 3 days later, the report came back. Reviewed and cleared, MWeb, COO. She sat with that for a moment. Then she flagged it again, this time with more detail. A full breakdown of the pattern, the dates, the amounts, the vendor irregularities. It came back inside 24 hours. Reviewed and cleared, MWeb, COO. Same words, like a copy and paste. Imani leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. A chief operating officer didn't personally clear minor contractor discrepancies. That wasn't how it worked. That was junior-level administrative work. There was no reason for a man at that level to have his name on these reports at all, unless he was watching for exactly this kind of flag. Unless he needed to make sure it disappeared quickly. She didn't submit a third flag. Instead, she opened a separate document on her personal laptop, not the company system, not anything connected to their network. She started copying dates, amounts, vendor names, and timestamps. She built a clean timeline, row by row, going back as far as she could access. She told herself she was just being careful. But the part of her brain that had once been called sharp by a professor who didn't hand out compliments, that part already knew. This wasn't careless bookkeeping. Someone had built this to be invisible, and they had been running it for a very long time. She didn't send it right away. She spent 2 days checking her work first, cross-referencing every date, every amount, every vendor entry. She reformatted the summary 3 times until it was clean and precise and impossible to dismiss. Then she attached it to a message typed asterisk, "I need you to look at this," and sent it to Alex before she could talk herself out of it. She put Noah down for his nap and waited. An hour passed, then 2. Her phone rang. She picked up. "I've read it." His voice was calm, steady, the same way his texts always were, all of it. "Okay," she said. A short silence. "How long have you known?" she asked. He didn't answer that question, not directly. Instead he said, "I've suspected Marcus Webb for about 8 months. The board has a long history with him. Internal audit reports up through his division." He paused. "Anyone I brought in through normal channels would have been visible to him within a week." Imani stood very still in the middle of her kitchen. "So you needed someone he had no file on," she said slowly. "Someone with no connection to the company, no history with the board, no reason for him to look twice at." The words landed one at a time. She sat down. "Was any of it an accident?" Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "The text, the $500, the job offer." She stopped. "Was any of it actually an accident?" Silence. Not a long silence, maybe 4 or 5 seconds, but it was the wrong kind of silence, the kind that had something moving around inside it. "The text was an accident," he said finally. That part I couldn't have planned. That part. She noticed those two words. She didn't say anything. When I saw the message, he continued, I looked up the number. I found your LinkedIn. I saw your background. Another pause. I made a decision. I want to be honest with you about that. Imani stared at the wall across from her. There was a small crayon scuff near the baseboard that had been there since she moved in. She had always meant to clean it off. You used me, she said, not angry, just flat. I gave you a real job at real pay for real work, he said. Everything you found yourself. I didn't tell you where to look. Because you didn't have to. He didn't argue with that. She sat there for a long moment, the phone pressed against her ear, Noah asleep in the next room, the summary she had built with her own hands sitting open on her laptop screen. He had chosen her deliberately. The question was whether that made her a tool, or something else entirely. She didn't know the answer yet, but she knew she wasn't done. The meeting request came on a Tuesday morning. No subject line, no agenda, just a calendar invite from an internal address she didn't recognize for 11 o'clock that day. She looked up the name attached to it. Marcus Webb, COO. Her stomach tightened. She accepted the invite and spent the next 2 hours pretending to work. At 11 exactly, she clicked the link. The video connected. Marcus Webb was already there, sitting at a large desk in a bright, well-appointed office. He looked exactly like his company photo, silver at his temples, a dark suit, a pleasant, practiced expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. Imani, he said, like he had known her for years. Thanks for making the time. Of course, she said. He folded his hands on the desk. Calm, unhurried. A man who was used to controlling the temperature of every room he walked into. I'll be straightforward, he said. We've noticed a pattern in your submitted reports. Flags on vendor accounts that have already been reviewed and cleared at the executive level, multiple times now. He tilted his head slightly. For a short-term contractor, that's an unusual amount of reach. I flagged what I found, she said carefully. He nodded slowly, like she had said something that confirmed a concern. The thing is, your role has a defined scope. What you've been doing falls outside of it. A small pause. Significantly outside of it. Imani kept her face still. I'd also gently note, he continued, his voice never changing, that your working relationship with Alexander appears to be closer than what's typical for a contractor arrangement. That kind of perception in a professional environment can become complicated for everyone involved. He let that sit for a moment. Especially for you. She didn't respond. Marcus glanced down briefly, as if checking a note, then looked back up. I understand you're a single mother, he said, gentle, almost sympathetic. That's admirable, truly. I just think it's worth knowing that custody arrangements can be sensitive to outside factors. Professional instability, questions about judgment. He offered a small, careful smile. I'd hate for any of this to create unnecessary difficulty in your personal life. The room went very quiet. Imani heard her own breathing. He had just put Noah in the sentence, not loudly, not with a raised voice or an open threat. He had done it the way men like him always did, softly, cleanly, with a smile still on his face. She looked at him on the screen. I understand, she said. Good, he seemed satisfied. I thought you would. The call ended. She sat without moving for a long time. He knew about Noah. He knew about the custody situation. He had been watching her not since last week, not since her last flag. Possibly since the very beginning. She gave herself 1 hour to be afraid. She sat on the couch after the call ended, Noah on her lap, and let the fear move through her. The cold, specific kind that comes from knowing someone powerful has been quietly studying your life. She thought about Noah, about the custody paperwork still sitting in a folder under her bed, about how little it would take for someone with Marcus Webb's resources to make her look unstable, desperate, inappropriate. She thought about all of it. Then she picked up her phone and called Alex. He answered on the second ring. I'm not calling because I'm scared, she said. I'm calling because I know what to do next. A brief pause. I'm listening. She had been turning it over since the moment Marcus smiled at her through that screen. The way he operated, careful, controlled, always just clean enough to be deniable, it told her something important. He was cautious, but caution had a weakness. Cautious people moved fast when they thought something was slipping out of their control. We give him something to react to, she said. A memo. Internal format looks legitimate, suggesting a large asset transfer is being routed to one of the shell vendors. Big enough that he can't ignore it. If he's watching the system, and we know he is, he'll move to intercept it. And when he does, Alex said slowly, he touches the money himself. And documents himself doing it. Silence on the line, not the uncertain kind, the thinking kind. I'd need someone outside the company to handle the technical side, he said. Someone who can monitor the system without going through internal channels. Then find that person, Imani said. I'll write the memo. She heard something shift slightly in his voice. Not surprise exactly, something quieter than that. Okay, he said. Give me 48 hours. She spent that evening studying the internal memo formats she had collected over her weeks on the job. She noted the language, the structure, the small procedural details that made documents look routine. She drafted the memo twice and deleted both versions. The third draft felt right, mundane enough to be real, significant enough to demand a response. She wrote Marcus Webb's name in the approval chain deliberately. Let him see himself in it. Alex called back the next afternoon. He had a forensic accountant, someone he trusted, someone entirely outside the company's network. The trap was ready to be set. Imani read over the memo one final time. Marcus had looked at her across a video call and seen a temporary contractor he could quietly undo. A woman with a baby and a fragile custody arrangement, and not enough money to fight back. He had been watching her since the beginning. He just hadn't been watching her closely enough. She hit send. Marcus took 31 hours. Imani was folding laundry when Alex's message came through. 3 words. He moved it. She sat down on the edge of the bed and read the follow-up slowly. Marcus had accessed the flagged transfer within the system, rerouted it toward one of the shell vendors, and covered his tracks the same way he always had, carefully, efficiently, and without knowing that every single action had been logged in real time by someone he had never heard of and could not reach. The forensic accountant filed the documentation that evening. Alex called an emergency board session for the following morning. Imani almost didn't go. It wasn't her meeting. She wasn't an employee. She had no official reason to be in that room. But Alex had asked her to come, and she had looked at Noah sleeping in his crib and thought about a man on a video call mentioning custody arrangements with a sympathetic smile, and she had said yes. The boardroom was on the 22nd floor. Long table, tall windows, the kind of room that was designed to make certain people feel small. She sat near the end of the table with a printed copy of her documentation in front of her and kept her hands still. Marcus arrived 5 minutes late. He looked composed, confident. He scanned the room as he entered, and when his eyes reached Imani, his expression shifted just slightly, just for a moment, before settling back into its usual careful calm. He took his seat. He straightened his jacket. He hadn't seen it coming, not fully, not her. Alex presented the documentation without drama. The forensic accountant walked the board through the timeline. 14 months of transfers, 2 shell vendors, and 31 hours ago, a COO moving real funds through a system he believed was clean. Marcus tried to speak twice. Both times the forensic accountant simply moved to the next page. By the end, the room was very quiet. 2 men came in through the side door. They were polite and unhurried, and they asked Marcus to come with them. He stood slowly, buttoned his jacket, and then he turned and looked directly at Imani across the length of the table. Enjoy it, he said. His voice was low and even. Women like you don't last in rooms like this. The room stiffened. Imani reached for her pen and wrote it down. Date, time, exact words. She didn't look up until she was finished. She heard him leave. The room slowly emptied after that. Board members gathered their things, spoke in low voices, filtered out. Eventually, it was just her and Alex at the long table, the city spread out gray and wide behind the windows. He looked at her for a moment. "Are you okay?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. "I think so," she said. "Not yet, but close." The offer came in writing 3 days later. Director of Financial Integrity. A permanent role, newly created, reporting directly to Alex. She read the contract twice at her kitchen table, Noah and his bouncer beside her, his round eyes tracking a mobile of soft animals spinning slowly overhead. She made herself slow down, read every line. She found 2 places where the terms weren't good enough and wrote back with changes, clearly and without apology. They accepted both within the hour. She printed the final contract, signed her name on the last page, and sat for a moment with the pen still in her hand. Noah made a small, contented sound beside her. She looked over at him, his round cheeks, his soft curls, his fingers wrapped around the bouncer strap like he was holding on for the ride. She thought about a night not so long ago when she had watered down the last scoop of formula and held him in the lamplight and felt like the walls were closing in from every direction. She capped the pen. She didn't cry this time. It didn't feel like relief. It felt quieter than that, like something that had been braced for a long time finally being allowed to rest. That evening, just after 7, there was a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. She looked through the peephole and went still for a moment before she opened it. Alex stood in the hallway in a plain dark jacket, no tie, nothing formal. He looked different outside of every professional context she had ever seen him in. Smaller somehow, more human. "I don't have an agenda," he said. "No meeting. I've just been trying to figure out the right way to say something since the night you texted me, and I've been doing a poor job of getting to it." Imani leaned against the doorframe and looked at him. In the months since that night, she had been grateful and suspicious and angry and impressed and uncertain, sometimes all within the same hour. She had turned him over in her mind the way you turn over something you can't quite classify, not sure whether to set it down or hold on. She looked at him, now standing in her hallway with nothing to offer, except whatever he was about to say. "You used his name," she said quietly. "That first night, I never told you his name." He held her gaze. "No," he said, "you didn't." He didn't explain it. He just stood there and let the weight of it sit between them, honest and open and unresolved. Imani looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. Some questions don't need answers to change everything. The night began with a mistake. What it became, that part was chosen, by both of them, one text at a time. "Thanks for staying with this story. Right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive." If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down.